Hello and welcome to another SkaredCast tactical video exclusive for you, the Patreons. We continue our series on the ITC Championship missions, where we take a look at each mission individually, the mission parameters, and then we look at the objectives on the table and go through every type of deployment that the mission has, and you dive into my brain a little bit and see how I would tackle the mission based on something as simple as deployment. So let's dive in to Mission 6 of the ITC Championship missions.
The Dark Kin.
So we look at Scenario 6, called Crucible of Champions. It's 5 objectives, one in the middle of the board and one on every intersecting line, essentially. So in this mission, you get a bonus point for having a character within scoring distance of three different objectives. So as long as you have 3 or more characters, you can get the bonus point quite easily in this mission. And it's definitely one of those missions where you have to be a little bit more aggressive towards the middle of the board in order to get the benefit of the bonus points. So let's go to our table, let's take a look at what it looks like, and then we'll dive in to each and every deployment style.
Okay, so here we have Scenario 6, Crucible of Champions. So as you can see the deployment here, one objective is right in the middle, and then we have one objective on each sort of horizontal axes, or vertical and horizontal axes. So 12 inches and 36, and then, 6 inches and 36 down the long board edge, and 12 inches and 24 down the short board edge. So it's a little bit different than the other 4-point objective one, which has the objectives sort of closer together to the middle of the board. So as you can see, there's 5 objectives. So when you're looking at secondary missions and things like that, you can get ground control, definitely something you can go for, because there's enough objectives to get 3 or 4 points later in the game. And, with this mission, to get bonuses, you have to have character keyword units within, scoring distance of the objective. So keeping in mind that you're usually going to be doing it in triangles. So let's take a look at the first style of deployment. And here we have the first type of deployment. So something that I just wanted to kind of make a note of is in this style of deployment, it's very easy to see that you have good control of one objective, and there's 3 sort of objectives that are very contested in the middle of the board. So just from this, I can tell that it's going to be hard for me to get the secondary bonus point. Why? Because if I want to get into the middle, especially against somebody who's shooting or depending on terrain, that sort of thing, it's going to be very hard to kind of contest it. So, in this sort of mission, the same as a lot of different missions, you can either focus on one side here and then push up towards a side, and essentially you're looking at this triangle here to take control of 3 objectives, or you're doing it on the other side. Now, I don't recommend you try and take all the objectives at once unless you have like a horde style list that can really kind of put pressure across the whole line. Now, it's very easy to take advantage of the entire board, and depending on terrain, it could really vary sort of what area you want to go. If there's a big line of sight blocker right here, you might be able to use that to kind of move around towards this objective here and mitigate the shooting from that side of the board. Now, because of the length of the board, it's going to be very hard to come all the way over here to this objective here. So once again, I'd try and keep the triangle. And if you get 3 characters in this zone, it'll help you get that bonus point. I find that in this mission, the bonus point is very important and has usually led to me winning the mission. Now, with this deployment type, you're probably going to have to put 1 character up here that's going to be sort of pushing up forward to the middle. Usually in my army, it would be a Homunculus or Urian Rakarth with the Talos or Grotesques, a very tough unit. Back here, I'd either have my Succubus zoning out the back zone, ready to kind of go in and kill something. And then on this side, I'd probably be sending the secondary Homunculus or Archon Skari with his Ravagers, and Archon Skari could go either or. You know, with his movement and advance, he can make it pretty much 8 inches plus an advance. He can get that almost in one turn, especially if he uses something like Fire and Fade or something like that, based on that deployment. So let's go into the second style of deployment, Dawn of War. Okay, so we look at Dawn of War. Dawn of War, you have 12 inches up on the corner of the board. Now, once again, you have one objective in each deployment zone, but it's a lot less distance to get from the objectives over here. Now, when I'm playing a Dawn of War mission, you know, you're either deploying your army centrally and then being able to attack either side. You're either deploying on one flank in order to refuse the flank, or you're deploying on another flank. Regardless of what you want to do, especially in the middle, you're eventually going to be pushing up one side or the other. Like, very rarely will you sort of try and spread out and do this. And as we're talking about triangles, you know, it's very important to note that you want to try and control those 3 sort of objectives. So having the 3 objectives back here means you can kind of move a strong central and strength into the middle, and you'll be able to control the 3 objectives. It's a lot easier to get characters into bonus scoring positions, and sometimes it's even worth for this mission sacrificing characters to get that bonus point, especially if your opponent didn't go for Headhunter, because if you hide your characters, it's very easy for your opponent to sort of not go for Headhunter. But, you know, I would definitely send Homunculus and Talos up here with the Grotesques. I'd have my Archon Skari either here or here, based on where I'm putting my Ravagers, and then I'd have my Succubus as a secondary and my other, like, Homunculus, based on where the enemy has deployed along their line as well. But in this deployment, it's very simple. I've always, you know, when I'm playing this mission, I'm trying to take the deployment style and kind of swing it into a hammer and anvil deployment style, which means that I'd be pushing into the middle and then basically putting a push for that objective. But as you can see, I'm probably going to ignore one of the objectives or maybe 2 of the objectives. I'm going to focus on 3 objectives. That would give me hold more, and the bonus point in every single point. So with this 12 inches up, you don't have to overcommit. It's just about deploying smart and then keeping track of where you're moving for the next couple of turns. With that, let's move into the third style of deployment, Search and Destroy. Okay, so Search and Destroy. Also known colloquially as table quarters. Now, I'm not here to argue whether or not you pick a corner and then get the opposite corner, or if it's a set deployment. I know that in the ETC, we usually use set deployments for table quarters, so you get that one, I get this one, so the terrain would kind of matter, etc., etc. Okay, but if you agree or disagree with that, you can put a comment down below in the comments. So here is one of the easiest ways to play Scenario 6. Why? Because now instead of controlling one objective in your deployment zone, you control 2 objectives. You have one on one flank, one on the other. And it's very easy to sort of create that triangle. Essentially, it's already made you that triangle. You can basically put a character right here and move quickly into the middle, and all of a sudden you're controlling the 3 main objectives. Now, the thing about this deployment style is that your opponent is going to be very close to you. So if they're doing, if they have a very aggressive in-your-face style list, like a Gallant army or something like that, it'll be very easy for them to kind of come at you. Now, it's very important to kind of note there's a lot of space in the table quarters, right, where there's not really any objectives. So it's very easy to sort of concentrate most of the damage in the middle of the board. However, if you decide to take one of these quarters as your own, you know, it gives you a sort of base of operations that can kind of push into the flank of your enemy. So if you decide to pick one of the table quarters to kind of take over and then threaten not only the 2 objectives that you have, but the objective in the enemy side, all of a sudden it kind of throws the game off balance. You don't have to be as aggressive in this deployment style because you already have access to 2 objectives, and you can kind of wait for your opponent to take the middle objective and counter push for a late game, or you can try, if your army is very aggressive, get into their deployment, like get into the middle really quickly at the start of the game and force your opponent to try and dislodge you. So depending on what the opposing armies are, this is a very flexible sort of deployment style. Just remember, depending on where you're pushing, don't forget to zone out your backfield back here so that nothing can sort of deep strike and get really annoying in the back. So let's take a look at the next style of deployment, which is similar to Spearhead, Hammer and Anvil. Okay, so this is deployment style number 4. Now, kind of like Spearhead Assault, you have control of 1 objective in your deployment zone, and there's 3 objectives in no man's land. So once again, you sort of have to commit if you want any sort of movement up in the game. And once again, you want to pick one of the triangles. Now, the cool thing here is that instead of having 24 inches to get from here to here, you only have this much space, so 12 inches or so. And it makes it a lot easier for you to kind of exert a strong influence in this area of the board, where the other deployment style essentially cuts off this whole area, and you have to move into it first and then put pressure. In this deployment style, you can essentially put pressure. Oh, excuse me. You can put pressure in this area of the board right away, and that makes it a lot easier to get your bonus points. Of course, your opponent's not going to be idle, so you have to make sure that you do it with purpose or kill the things that are going to be threatening your push as you move into the game in turns 3 and 4, which is where the game is usually decided a lot of the time. Now, your opponent, or looking at it this way, you have a lot of space in your backfield. So, you have to learn how to zone out your backfield, especially against deep strikers. It's very easy to sort of push up really quickly and sort of abandon your backfield, but you have to make sure that you put a unit back there that might be resilient or that can hold a flank, and then use that as a pivot point to then push your entire army up this way. Or pick one of the sides. So you pick one or the other, but you need something, or you either block the entire side of the board so that nothing can deep strike, or you start deep strike blocking from like that objective and then move up this way as the game progresses, turning it into, as you can see, more of a table quarter style deployment rather than a hammer and anvil. So you're kind of consolidating your forces on this side over here, and then you're pushing it up on this side as well. So let's go into number 5, Frontline Assault. Okay, so Frontline Assault. Similar to Dawn of War deployment. Biggest difference in this one is that you have a lot more room in the middle. You're a lot closer to the middle objective, and you're a little bit further away from either side objectives. So the philosophy stays pretty much the same. The biggest difference is, sort of like in table quarter deployment, your opponent will have a lot less distance to travel to the middle objective as well. So having the speed to, essentially flip a flank on this way, right, is important. But as you can see here, the triangle for this deployment is good. So you want to sort of put an influence area here, and you're trying to turn this style of deployment back into table quarters style deployment. Now, of course, which side you choose depends on things like army composition, who goes first, how much you have left, what's in reserve, that sort of thing. But it's very important to remember that, in this deployment zone, there's a lot more distance between each of the 2 sides. So there's a lot of distance between that side and this side, and it kind of skews the look of the battlefield. Like, once you just put it a battlefield barren with no terrain on it, anything like that, you can kind of see it's all about areas and zones of influence. So if you decide to do the triangle, you just have to make sure that you have the stuff that can move quickly up into here, into this sort of zone, to really control it. Now, this is where I'd like to add. Don't forget that you don't have to kind of completely surround an objective to put to control it. You know, you have to be within 3 inches of the objective. So you could technically be back here, right, and still control that objective. And you can have one model here and then string a model and string a unit all the way back here and still control that objective. So don't be afraid to just put one model in scoring distance of that objective, and then kind of string your way back, especially in a deployment like this, while you say push into the middle and create that zone of influence in this general area. Now, getting characters and whatnot is very important. So something like Archon Skari, I would probably send out that way, especially if I'm trying to sweep a flank this way, you know, because my Ravagers would kind of push hard out that way, and he can reroll his advance roll starting on turn 1. So even if I put him over here, a move plus an advance, it would get him easily there if I'm trying to get that bonus point, which is very important in any sort of ITC mission. But I find in this one, it's very easy to get the bonus mission if you just have it in mind. Okay, so let's go into the last deployment style, which is one of my favorites, Vanguard Strike. And we're back with the last deployment style. So, similar to Search and Destroy, table quarters, you have 2 objectives in your deployment zone. So every deployment zone has 2 objectives. And in this sort of deployment, you know, you don't have as much room back here. And there's a decent amount of distance between 2 things. Now this is one of the most versatile deployment styles, because you can take this board and turn it into a Dawn of War board, or you can take it and turn it into a table quarters board, or you can take it and turn it into a hammer and anvil board relatively easily, depending on what you want to do with your force in general. Now, it makes it a lot easier to create a zone of control. Like, you're normally going to be doing it, like, it's less likely that you're going to be pushing into to create a triangle here. It's less likely that you're going to try a triangle here. You're going to essentially push and create a triangle in this general area, unless you completely abandon that one here, put all your strength here and push up here, which you know could, and that's, if you do that though, you're going directly into the heart of the enemy army, like, if that makes sense, because the heart of their army is going to be right in here. And if you put most of your strength here and push up, you're essentially going right into their army. So if you can do that, you better be ready to fight really hard tooth and nail for that. So this one is very easy to sort of block your backfield, kind of take both objectives over here and sort of push up towards the middle, ready to take those bonus objectives. Now, this will be very dependent on terrain, and usually ITC terrain will have like a nice big line of sight blocker here, some nice sight blockers in the middle, so using terrain to your advantage in this sort of deployment will be important. Don't overcommit. That's a cool thing about Vanguard. You don't need to overcommit in this one, because you're in a pretty confident position. All you have to do is screen effectively and stop the enemy from pushing into one of your zones. And eventually, with either overwhelming shooting or firepower, you can launch an attack into that deployment zone from the middle of the board and either go that way or go that way. Now, it's a lot easier to attack the enemy deployment zone from here to here, so straight line, because that's less distance than from here to here. So this objective will be very vulnerable to you from attack from the enemy, and that objective will be vulnerable for the enemy against you. So you can either put strong units like Talos, Grotesque here to sort of deter the enemy, or you can put like small units here that will pull enemy units here, and then put your strong stuff here, and then push with your strong stuff over there. And that's really your choice. All the meantime, getting something like a tough character in the middle and a couple of support characters, you know, with aura bubbles or whatever towards the objectives here to get that bonus point, which is a very important part of Mission 6. So, with that, we conclude the different deployment styles of Mission 6. Let's break it all down and finish this. And that is it. It concludes our ITC mission format, where we looked at the different missions. We went through every single deployment type. That's Mission 1 through Mission 6, just in time for the end of the season and the ITC championships at Las Vegas Open. So, leave a comment down below if you enjoy this sort of content. Thank you so much for continuing to support me and what I do here. If you have any cool ideas for other videos, let me know so I can get those creative juices flowing. And I hope that this was useful to you as it was to me to visualize each mission individually. I'm going to make sure I link up, and I'm going to make a playlist for this entire series, so make sure you check out the playlist from start to finish if you have not already. After all, I am Skari, your grateful host, signing off. Until the next time, Skari out.